Hello, hello, and welcome. This is Hakiza. Today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, and I'm being joined by a very, very special guest today. We're going to be discussing what happens after a breakup. Do people keep in touch? Yes or no? And today we're about to have that conversation. I'm being joined by Cassandra. She's known as a Master of Counseling student. She's in her second year of Masters, focusing on sex therapy. We have Summer. She is an entrepreneur who is pursuing a career in real estate, and she's a certified personal trainer. And we're also being joined by Raoul, known as Le Connecté le plus suspect à Edmonton. Guys, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Cassandra, I'm very confused. Why do people's feelings change dramatically right after the breakup?
It's when you look at kind of the research or how humans deal with their grief.
Right.
A lot of it actually stems from our attachment styles. Have you heard of those before?
Not all of them, but yes.
Okay. So we have different attachment styles,
Yeah.
and these are things that develop when we're kids. And as we kind of progress into adulthood and we start forming intimate relationships, those attachment styles we had as kids kind of carry into that. So you can have, like a secure attachment, an anxious attachment, avoidant, or disorganized.
Right.
And that's actually going to play into how you handle your breakups. So the research has shown, especially in young people, if you have someone that's maybe like an anxious attachment style,
Right.
and they're dating someone who's avoidant. So anxious is kind of like a people pleaser, like they really want it to work. And then you have the avoidant person who's kind of dismissive, right?
Yes.
They don't really care too much. And so you kind of get into this like cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
Right? And so what happens when they break up is they almost kind of get stuck in that cycle. And that's where a lot of those emotions can come out, is when you're trapped in that cycle where you're trying to pursue someone, they're running away, you're pursuing, they're running away. And this is so frequent in young people's lives.
Interesting. Summer, do you think it's normal? Is it actually normal, like, for people to keep in touch after a breakup?
Yes and no. I think there's two circumstances. One, when someone's in either an abusive relationship or there is a lot of toxicity in the relationship, then no, you should not ever keep in contact. The only thing that I can say, if this person that was toxic or was abusive has done the work, has went to therapy, has created a safe space and wants to like apologize and
Right.
move forward, yes. But to get back together, I don't know. That's per person. When you are both on that mature level and you both are healed, I think you can still be in good terms with each other. Obviously not friends,
Yeah.
but being like, hey, how's it going kind of thing when
Yeah.
you see them, I
Yeah.
think is totally cool. I think society tells us that we shouldn't, but I think that's just trauma telling us that we shouldn't.
I think that's one way I didn't really think about. So Raul, do you think is it actually required? Do you think it should be something that people should be doing?
I wouldn't go to the extent of saying that it's actually required, but I would also say that it's a yes or no. It depends on the circumstances people actually broke up.
Right.
There are some breakup that you would never actually tell somebody to go back. And it actually takes a certain amount of maturity for people to part ways and to be able not to be friends, because you don't need to be friends after that. Then if you want to be friends with your ex, it's going to create some other problem with your new relationship, for example.
Right.
But you don't have to be enemies as well. You can still have, like she said, you can still have, like a good relationship. You can be more, and then you just say hi, even if you are with your new partner and everything. So just to keep it like not very toxic or something that is actually positive. So is it actually something that is required? I wouldn't say that.
Right.
But it's actually possible to be friends with somebody. But it also takes some kind of level of maturity, and it has to be from both people in a couple.
That's very interesting. Do you think that's something that should be included, like today is like in our society? Do you think it's
I think it's something that isn't really talked about, you know?
Right.
And I think it should be talked about more. And I think it should also be recognized that a breakup is a form of like grief and loss, right? And it should be treated in the same way, right? Like just as someone grieves the loss of like a pet or a loved one, like yes, a breakup may not be as severe, but the process of grieving and going through that loss is really quite similar, if not the same. So I think, you know, Raul makes a good point in that, yeah, you can be friends, but you kind of have to have that maturity and that ability to part ways completely before I think you can actually go back and be friends after. Like, I don't think that you can kind of be friends right off the hot press, you know?
Right. So, Sama, so let's say people are in a relationship and they are madly in love with one another and things didn't work out and they all take their different path. But again, in most cases, we find that people even start blocking each other, even talk to each other. To me, I'm trying to think about is like one point in life, this person meant something to you. You say this person, I love you. This person made you laugh. You share good and bad moments. How does it flip so quickly and it comes to a point where we can't even talk to one another, even blocking one another?
I think it comes down to the person's experiences, their traumas and their insecurities, their fears. A lot of people don't realize that trauma is not just PTSD and something really bad happening to them. It can be such a small, significant thing that can create that trauma process. When you do break up with someone or there's conflict or there's circumstances, that trauma comes back and it makes you feel like that person that was in that position. So then that's when the switch flips and you're like, I don't want it anymore. I think it's just a traumatic response to what you're feeling in that moment. That person's hurting you, that person's not listening to you. They're not taking what you are feeling into consideration. It's all about them. And I think that's what society is not realizing is we're not communicating properly.
Correct.
And we're assuming. There's a lot of assumptions and a lot of fear-based assumptions. So we take those fear-based assumptions and then we put it on our partner and then we create that cycle, that same cycle over and over and over and over again.
Interesting. Bro, let's say you are, you are minding your own business and your ex had put you as one of their emergency contacts. And they call you because it's an emergency. And let's say you did not really part ways in a positive way with this person, but again, the phone rings, they need your help. What is your initial response to that?
First of all, it's an emergency. It might be life-threatening. Even if that is something I'm not going to do even to my worst enemy. If it's something that is life-threatening, then definitely have to step in. But the thing is, did I know that I was actually still on my contract? Exactly. So if not, then that's something that we definitely talk about after. If I have to save a life, then I definitely go for it and then should deal with the rest after.
Interesting. Cassandra, do you think most people enjoy in toxic relationships?
Sorry?
Do you think people enjoy being in toxic relationships?
I don't think that people enjoy it. I think that people end up in those because, again, their attachment styles kind of lead to that toxicity in relationships.
Right.
So, you know, it's so interesting because I think we all kind of know that classic story of you've been dating this guy for 5 years and he won't marry you, he won't commit to you, he won't even say I love you. You guys break up and 6 months later, he's married. He's married, right? And so you think to yourself, oh God, like, what did I do? What was wrong? And and in all reality, it had nothing to do with you and everything to do with just not meshing, right? Because we're all so different and we're all so unique. And unfortunately, we can end up in these toxic situations with people who are just not right for us. And that toxicity just festers in the fact that we are just fundamentally different people.
I never looked at it that way.
That's actually interesting now. So let's say we have both of you actually toxic. He said about enjoyment. Down the road, when you look at them, despite of fighting every day or just, like fighting even in public, whatever, they really don't actually care about it. So how do you explain they're kind of enjoying, and nobody actually wants to leave that relationship. So what is that?
I think when people are in those types of relationships where it is that kind of toxicity where they're fighting all the time, it could be like fear leading them not wanting to leave because they may have fears of never being able to find someone else or like their own personal insecurities.
Right.
They might feel like they're incapable of receiving love. And so they just found someone that is kind of giving them love. So they're going to stick it out, right? A lot of that has to do with their own internal self-love and their own self-esteem. If you don't have a lot of that, and if you don't have like self-love and self-respect first, then leaving a toxic relationship is going to be really hard.
Can I add to that too? Also,
Yeah.
People sometimes don't realize the relationships they have with their families transcend into the relationships they have with people.
Right.
So if their relationship with their family dynamic is really toxic, that's all they know, and that's what transcends into going into those toxic relationships. That's where people get into the abusive relationships and they're okay with it because that's what they experienced with their mom and dad, having that like, oh, mom and dad, like that's normal. So it's that toxic trait that progresses into.
I'm having, so I'm going to put this to all of you. I had this conversation with one of my friends, and she said, Akiza, I cannot keep contact with my ex. And I tried to have a conversation, and she said because the ex cheated on her. And so the point is somebody who is hurt like that, and eventually they find somebody else that they want to be in a relationship with. In my understanding, don't you think this person is carrying baggage from the previous relationship to the next relationship? To me, it's reasonable to sit down with the person and say, why did you do this to me? And perhaps having this conversation can help me in the next relationship on how to avoid it. Is that something that should be, is that understandable?
Well, I think, again, like if you're looking at it like a grief cycle, closure is a part of that grief cycle, right? So when we have that baggage, if someone has cheated on us or we have questions that aren't answered, that closure is a really important step in order for us to maybe not necessarily move on from the grief, but be able to live with it, right? So I think especially when something as fundamental as loyalty and trust is broken, it can take a long time. And a conversation with that ex that did that to you, I think that can be really helpful and that can provide sort of the necessary steps towards closure and perhaps moving on and being able to trust other people again.
Right.
Yes, I think it all comes down to how did you go through the process of it? Did you actually heal? Because if you didn't, then you're just going to actually carry the same wound to the next person. And it's going to be very hard for the next person. He doesn't know or she doesn't know what happened before. Even if they know actually, but sometimes trying to compensate that with them sometimes is actually really hard because they don't know how to act. So it actually comes down to, did you heal? The process doesn't really matter. Some people will heal by going through it by themselves. Like she said, some other people can actually still heal by talking about it. You've been away for so long and then you're like, you can't keep it, you can't take it anymore. But by actually having a real conversation with the person makes you feel better inside. So it actually comes down to the process of healing. If you are healed completely and you've accepted it and you have closure, like she said, you're good to go. But if you didn't, then it's just going to be a cycle. It's just going to catch up to you and it's probably going to actually mess up some other stuff in your relationship. So the key point will be you have to go through it. It's painful.
Right.
But you have to take it.
Right.
You have to go through it. If you don't go through it and heal completely, then it's just going to be a cycle and just have to catch up with you over every time. And it can take years. It can go even into your marriage. So the healing process is really, really very important because both people sometimes can get hurt. It doesn't just disappear overnight. It takes something. You have to go through something. So I think that's my take.
Right.
I have a little bit of both of those takes. I don't necessarily think that speaking to an ex about with closure, I it's like a give or take for me.
Mhm.
Because like for me personally, I would never want to speak to my ex about that because I don't need to know what he was thinking. What he was thinking is on him. I've done the steps to heal. I created my self-love, I created my concepts, and then I just moved past it. I think the most important thing is the healing and just learning the coping mechanisms, learning to be vulnerable, learning to have courage and just not base the fear that you had with your ex. I think if you talk to your ex again, you're going to start thinking about those things again, and you're going to continue those cycles again. So basically, like, out of sight, out of mind. Heal yourself. If you do want to talk to them, okay, cool, do it. But don't. People want to talk to somebody because they expect a certain response. So if you're talking to somebody and they're saying something and you're like, what the hell? Like, no, like, this is not what I want to hear. Then you're going to go back into that cycle.
Yeah.
So it's better to be like, okay, I have my assumptions of what he did or what she did. I'm going to heal from that. I'm going to let it go. I'm letting it go to the universe, and I'm going to become the person that I want to be, and I'm going to reflect the love that I want. So I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is it's all you. Like, we can ask our exes to repent, and we can ask our exes for reassurance, but at the end of the day, it's all about your self-concept and all about like just healing and moving forward. And yeah,
That's
I'm gonna flop with you on that one.
okay.
But Kassan, do you think people after, because you mentioned it's like a loss, do you think people need therapy after every breakup?
I mean, I'm completely biased. As a therapist in training, everyone needs therapy. Let me just get that out there. Everyone needs therapy.
Yeah.
We all need it. But I think therapy comes in a variety of different ways. Okay, so therapy doesn't have to necessarily be counseling with a therapist. Therapy can be like a self-love healing journey. It can be bibliotherapy, where you're doing the self-help books, you're reading. It can be being out in nature and doing something that you love. There's so many different ways that people can heal, and it's just figuring out what that healing process is for you. And I think to add on to Summer's point, like, if your healing process involves a conversation with an ex, cool. Yeah. Have at her, right? And I think if you're going into that with an open mind, and if your intention is to learn and bring closure for yourself, then I think it can be really healthy. I think if your intention is to look for an answer, then that's exactly like Summer said. It's just going to send you down that spiral. So you have to come to a kind of almost like closure with yourself to be like, I just need to accept whatever answer I'm going to get for what it is. If I truly think that talking to my ex is going to give me what I need.
Do you have a point to that?
Well, it's not really a point, but I actually have this question. Like, so she mentioned something like it's really personal, and I believe in that. If you don't take one step further to healing, you're just gonna be there. So is this saying that says that eventually, with time, everything will fall into place? So people actually talk about this very often, but I don't believe this actually particular saying is relevant when it comes to relationships, because you can wait and be like, okay, time is going to actually, eventually everything's gonna fall into place. You can wait 15 years. The healing comes from inside. Does it actually work like that, or this can also be applied to relationships as well?
Well, I mean, it's so great that you say that, because when we're talking grief and loss, one of these quotes that I had in one of the courses that I was taking, a grief and loss course, and the professor brought in this speaker, and I'll never forget what she said, because she said, it's not time. She's like, healing from grief and loss is not about time. She's like, it's what you do with that time. So you can sit around till the cows come home and hope that things are going to get better, but unfortunately,
it doesn't go away.
No,
because it's just with you. I think,
absolutely.
I think someone said something about trauma.
Yes.
Do you think, because I hear you attract your own energy?
Yes.
So do you think it's people with similar experiences can share that?
Yes and no. I think you attract what you are. So if you're attracting positivity, if you're attracting courage, if you're attracting all the things that you want in life, then you will attract it. But you also might not, and that's okay. The biggest thing to realize is that even if you are dealing with someone that isn't on that same path as you, you can still be supportive. Yeah. You can still help them create those boundaries, just help them with their healing process. And that doesn't mean that you have to hold their hand and be like, this is what you need to do. A lot of people don't realize, they'll be like, oh, this person has so much baggage, or this person isn't healed, forget about it. But really, it's just words of endearment. It's words of affirmation that they're looking for. It's just someone to say, hey, I know you're going through a lot. I'm here to help and support you in any way you need. I'll step back, and when you want to speak with me, come talk with me, right? I feel like people just don't take the time, like he said. Everyone thinks that there's a right timing, or that everything happens for yes, or what's meant to be is meant to be. Yeah. You have to make it work. You have to put the effort in. You have to be present and be aware of your surroundings for it to work, for it to progress, for it to keep going. Like, I'm a huge Brene Brown freak. Like, I listen to all of her TED Talks and everything, and I read all of her books. And the most like literally, life is vulnerability. If you're not vulnerable, if you're not showing that part of yourself, then you're not going to attract what you want. If you're going to close yourself and be scared and afraid and hide away from your past traumas, then that person's going to see that and they're going to be like, well, she's not working for herself. Why would I stay here in this relationship with this person while she's not working with herself, or while he's not working for himself, right? So I think that's, like, with spirituality, I think it's a one-person thing. I don't think it's connected. It can be like I know a lot of people that are very spiritual together and separately, and it works for them. But I don't think that one person has to be spiritual and the other person has to be spiritual for it to work. I think they just both have to be human, and they have to communicate. They have to be vulnerable, and they have to let go of those fears, insecurities, and doubt, and just let it go, because that's where progression goes. And that's where we lack, right, in our society right now, is we're instant gratification. We want everything. And if that relationship isn't what we want, then on to the next. Let's look for something better, right?
And there's also another problem. Like, today we have the internet.
Yeah.
So many love gurus, so many self-proclaimed life coach, whatever, will come up with something that is definitely doesn't make sense. But just because of how he speaks and how he dresses up and how he presents himself as a group, he knows how to talk. So people are going to grasp that as if it was actually real, something really tangible. They don't take the time to actually think about it. And people's experience are different. Yours might be different from mine. My process of healing is way different than everybody else. Like, she's got me back to that one. She mentioned communication and vulnerability and being honest. You may be actually in the process of healing. Yeah. I am fine. I don't have any problem. Or I'm actually in the process of healing. But I'm like, you know what? Even though I've been through this, but I think I'm actually ready to love again. You're not gonna be fully. It's a gamble, you know. Yeah. You're not gonna be fully. If you said you're going to be fully ready and everything, then probably not gonna step into the relationship scene yet. So the other person might be that. If the other person is not toxic, the other person can actually hold their partner's hand and go with them through the healing journey to come out of it with success. But it all takes two people to be open to each other and speak their mind and say exactly what is there, so, and patience and communication.
So Cassandra, psychologically speaking, the concept of an ex being uncomfortable with somebody talking to their ex, is that lack of confidence? Is that lack of trust?
I think it could be a lot of different things. That's a very sort of personal thing for each individual. So yeah, it could be lack of trust, right? They could have their own insecurities, right? Like self-esteem issues, self-love issues. At the end of the day, I think having open conversation about that with your current partner and with the ex, right? If you guys are still friends or something like that, that needs to be there, right?
Okay.
So, it can come from so many different places, and as long as everyone is being honest with everyone about how they're feeling and how they're doing in the situation, I think you can get through it.
Interesting. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming through, and I would really ask if any words of confirmation, of encouragement, or any way you could say it, for people who probably are listening or watching us. What's one thing you're able to tell them?
I think if you want to talk to your ex and you have valuable or good reasons for that, then go for it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
One thing I could say is don't grab everything you see on the internet as facts, and there's no relationship comes from one. I've been seeing this on the internet. They see people happy together today on Instagram and everything, and they go, relationship, couple goals on everything, and then down the road after 2 months, they break up in the weirdest way you can imagine. So don't grab everything you see on the internet, and just be you. Just be open, just be about getting better. We all go through whatever, but be about getting better, and read and research. Self-awareness is actually very important when it comes to this matter. So I think I would say that.
I agree. I think for me, it's all about accountability and vulnerability. Creating that healing process, creating that space, the boundaries. If you do want to speak with your ex, like Sandra said, go for it.
Yeah.
There's no rules. I hate when people are like, don't do this or don't do that. There's really no rule, and no one can really tell you what you can and what you can't do. I think my biggest advice is when you are going into a new relationship, one, make sure you are healing. You don't have to fully heal to begin a relationship.
Exactly.
To be vulnerable and communicate. Even if you have a hard time, communicate that you're having a hard time so you can build that bond to create those safe spaces where you can talk. And don't compare your partner to your ex. If you have insecurities, if you have anything, just talk to them. That's like the biggest thing is communication. We can't say it enough, but it's very broken. So just leave the past in the past, work on yourself, work on your self-concept, work on your self-love, heal, and enjoy that journey. You never know when it's going to happen. There's never a right time. You just have to enjoy it, and you have to make the effort. Point blank, you gotta make the effort. And some days you gotta make a little bit more effort, and some days he has to make a little bit more effort. So it's a balancing game. And if you're going into it with pure intentions and pure concepts, then you'll be able to create that relationship. You'll be able to progress in that relationship for sure, regardless of any circumstance, anything that arises.
Wow, that's some wisdom. Thank you very much, everyone, for sharing your time, wisdom, and experience. So I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for all the conversation. It was awesome.
This is very constructive.
Yes.
Very.
Bye.
See you next time.
Salut les amis, hello friends, this is Hakiza Frank. I'm going to be frank with you. Subscribe below for more videos. Thank you for the courtesy of your time. Merci beaucoup et à la prochaine.